if we start wandering off topic, then please forgive us. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about how we use Voice 21 within mathematics and STEM, but we use it really in every subject. It was something that I was fortunate enough to go on the training with School 21, who've developed the Voice 21 strategies for literacy. And then we have then used that across the curriculum. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of Voice 21. How many, actually, it'd be interesting to know how many of you actually use Voice 21 in your school. Maybe you could just pop in the chat if you do, or if you don't have any information about it at all, then that's fine. Can you see the chat? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Just out of interest, it's nice to know kind of who
just started it.
Lovely.
Oh, lovely, good.
So what I'm going to do is give you a just a brief overview at the beginning, instead of going into detail about Voice 21 like you'd have if you were doing the training, and then just show how we've developed that across mathematics and STEM. And then if there are any questions at any point, just raise your hand, or just put a question in the chat, and then we'll answer that if we can, if we can think clearly. So just going to start with, hopefully, can everyone see the slides? I just want to make sure that that's right. Haven't used, is everyone okay with that? Great. Yeah, so basically, oracy really is central to everything we do in school. We do a lot of drama, we do a lot of philosophy for children. So Voice 21 just fits naturally into that. And what Voice 21 is, giving them opportunities to develop their understanding through talk, but actually structuring the talk. So it's not just a free-for-all, have a chat about something, turn to your partner, talk. What it made me realize was we structure you know, our extended written tasks, you've got your differentiation, you've got your sentence stems, but actually, are we giving that to them during oracy tasks, which then is going to have a knock-on effect on their writing. And the same then when it comes to STEM and maths, giving them the language to discuss orally then is going to impact that, you know, what they do when it comes, especially when it comes to scientific concepts. We found it really helpful in that.
And also because we're in a Welsh school and the pupils predominantly come from English speaking homes, getting that sort of those specific words in Welsh and all across inside it's been really useful to really drill those sort of what the Welsh words are for. You know, they might know them in English, but actually understanding and how to use them in Welsh, this has really helped that too.
So what they have, if it will click, is it click forward? There we go. So we've got the oracy framework. I just want to show you this. So it's about breaking it down into the different elements of talk. So you've got the physical, so that they understand how to vary their voice, body language. Then you've got the linguistic, which includes vocabulary, language, rhetorical techniques. Then you've got cognitive, which includes the content, the structure, the clarifying, the summarizing, self-regulation, reasoning. And then you've got the social and emotional, so working with others, listening and responding, confidence in speaking, audience awareness. And you can kind of look at this as almost like a planning tool to kind of think, right, what do I want in terms of their talk and their oracy within this lesson? You know, I've got a year 6 this year who were quite quiet. Therefore, you know, I'm looking a lot at getting them their confidence in speaking. Are they happy? Do they know how to vary their voice? Are they happy to work with others as well? And I think that collaboration is something that we feel after COVID has really taken a dive with the children. So it's something that we work strongly on, and using that across all curriculum subjects. So one of the things I found most useful from the training was the groupings. So, you know, we all do our think, pair, share, we do all things like that. But one of the things that really works well is the trios. And it's that 3 students talking with each other, but 2 students are talking and then 1 student is listening. And I think that's the thing, as part of oracy, listening is just as important as talking. And these different strategies for grouping are really, really useful during the warm-ups to your lessons. You've got other things like the onion is where they've got an inner and outer circle and they're back to back and they can talk, or they can be facing their partner if you want. And then the coaching onion is that you've got it's a good one for switching partners. So the inner circle can rotate and then go to a new partner to have the same conversation. So these kind of things just make the talk more interesting and exciting as well. So how does the trio work? Sorry, so for example, you could have something as simple as this up. All living things have a heartbeat. You've got a timer. So one person has to agree, one person has to disagree, and they find that skill quite difficult sometimes, because it's, if they have an opposing opinion, they find it difficult to think as if they were thinking the other way. And I think that is a useful tool to kind of get them to start thinking. Obviously, you could differentiate these. This is taken from year 6, the statements, the sentence stems. You could differentiate it then lower down. Maybe you've only got one sentence stem on each side. And the third person is listening, and then they have to give their opinion about who they think the most persuasive is and say their reason why. Then I would do 3 of these. So every single person has a chance to be every single role. And I think that's what's important. Otherwise, you're going to have some children who consistently say, I'm going to be C, the person who's listening, because they don't have to do the talking, or they have to do minimal talking then. Therefore, doing 3 of them where all the roles are switched is helpful. And then another different one, if we don't save the environment, there'll be no planet left to live on. You can do a mathematics one if you're looking at money. It isn't important to save your money, spend as much as you want. So those kind of bringing in these concepts into the warm-ups of your lessons. You could do it simply with just partner A having to describe something and partner B having to close their eyes and guess. So if you've got adaptations like this one in science, they close their eyes, then the animal has, and they've got to use vocabulary. I've used this in year 6 where I've extended it, where there is less challenging vocabulary on one side of the slide, more challenging vocabulary on the other, and the children then have the choice to choose which vocabulary they're going to use.
And you can see with something like this how we can be easily differentiated across the school, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think that these kind of structured opportunities for talk are really where you get to hear who does have information, and also those ones, especially as I said, my year group are quite shy when it comes to whole class discussion, but actually during group work like this is where I can walk around and kind of gauge who has a good understanding and who is, got differing opinions. So Beth's going to go on now to talk about some talk tasks.
So obviously with maths, we all think about it, and it's like, right, our lesson structure is we do our maths, mental mathematics, then we go to our task, and then maybe talk isn't something that we do that often. But with what sort of the introduction of with the new curriculum and the proficiency, sorry, I've got the Welsh words in my head, and the proficiencies, we think it's really important that they do have time to discuss and offer their opinion. So we were doing this in our language lessons, but we actually thought these are really lovely little activities you can do as a plenary or as a start of a lesson. And actually it gives you it gives you an insight of what children do understand. So this one would be, so partner A would be saying, they would look at the pictures, they would look at the statements and decide what they thought it should be measured. So flying to Spain, what do I measure in? And then partner B has to agree or disagree. And then they would swap, well, they could swap over or a different talk task there. So it really gives you an insight of their understanding of measure, because it is a difficult one, isn't it? If somebody hasn't been on a plane, or if someone doesn't have an understanding of sort of its time, isn't it? That is really is an easy way to, it's an assessment for learning tool as well, we find. Quite quickly, you can see, right, we need to do a lot more work on this or this or this.
And it's a good way of kind of raising any misconceptions.
Yeah.
You know, that understanding. Like if you do ask a child sometimes, or how long will it take to do this? Sometimes the answers you get back are completely, you know, not within a range of what it could be. Therefore, this is a good way for you to assess and think, right, do they understand? Or if someone is saying, you know, you're going to measure
writing your name in weeks,
then you know, that's an extreme example, but you know that they're not on the right kind of track. And then the same, we've got lots of different ones. This is in Welsh, but the same kind of thing, isn't it?
On temperature, because that understanding, I think they're really good for those little abstract ones, just about, isn't it? And with sort of measures, a good one, as in, how cold is it out? When do I need to wear a jumper? What degrees does it need to be that I'm wearing a jumper? When is the freezing point? You know, this understanding. And the same, I've done one with weight, because I think how much does a feather weigh? What does a bottle of water weigh?
Oh, that's a really interesting
and I think for us as
one.
adults, it's a difficult concept. So it's really good for that conceptual understanding.
And their idea, you do that one in year 6, and you know, then you ask, how much does an elephant weigh? How much does a feather weigh? How much does an apple weigh? And you know, I've had you know, the most ridiculous answers for something like an apple, which shows then, right, we need to work on this understanding of what that could be. So this is a good one in terms of which one is the right temperature. So you're bringing it in, you know, and do you agree or disagree? Then there's another one, different talk tasks, and bringing a bit of reasoning in. How many seats? How much money do you think is in that pile? How many angles or shapes? How many pennies does it take to make that grid? What does the cake weigh? So just interesting kind of ideas to see where their understanding is. If you have any questions and we're talking too quickly and you want us to slow down, please just say. So then you can move on to do something like discuss like an expert. So bringing in this idea of during your topic, and I'd say this is a really good topic ending thing to do. You could do it at the beginning, and then you could revisit it at the end to see about their understanding. So if you were doing space, for example, you would have your vocabulary on this vocabulary target. So in the middle, you've got your more simple vocabulary. Then you've got slightly harder, and then the green ones, you know, more subject specific sometimes, or even just words. If I use this in literacy, it would be those wow words that you really want to like push. But so you get 3 points for any of the words you use in green, 2 points for the orange words, and 1 point for the red words. But you get a minus point, and we probably get quite a few of these today for well, I think, like, you know, you want the kind of discussion to flow. And then the other person would be keeping a tally chart of how they think they did. So it's quite a nice way. You could have it, like I said, at the beginning of the subject to kind of get a basic idea of who has an idea about space. And then at the end, and you can populate these with any vocabulary that you want to kind of push, if you what your key vocabulary really is you want from them. And it work with anything. I've done it in humanities with the chartists and Newport, you know, all kinds of subjects. It's really with our digital competency, e-safety. So what do they know? And they just have to talk about all these things. And then, as quickly as possible, they have a time limit. And then you'd switch over, maybe do the same one and see if they can beat someone else's score. There you go. I'd get a minus point for it. So they work really well. Oh God, a lot of M's now. So then we've got talk cards. So talk cards obviously have come from Voice 21, but I like ones that look a little bit nicer. I quite like my things to look nice. I didn't like the ones that came from Voice 21. They were a bit plain, so I kind of changed them. So we've got them in English and Welsh. We use them throughout literacy, but also cross-curricularly. So what they are is breaking down those different skills within group discussion. And what we would do with these is you wouldn't introduce them all at once. You would introduce maybe a few at a time, and maybe if you're lower down in school, we've got them differentiated as well for lower down in school with less sentence stems on them and only using the simpler ones. But you would bring them in maybe a few at a time, and then by year 6, when they're used to them, you can introduce them all. You can use them in different ways. You can either assign that role to the person, but the way I think works better, so not one person is just stuck doing the same role through it all, is that the cards are placed in the center of the table, and then when they want to be a different role, so this is the prober. So a prober digs deeper into the argument and asks for evidence and justification of ideas. So they'd say stuff like, what do you think would be the effect of? Why do you think? Can you provide an example? Have you considered? Then you'd have the clarifier, simplifies it and makes things clearer by asking questions. What do you mean when you say? Can you explain a bit more about? Does that mean? Please, can you clarify what is meant by? And then you've got the instigator, who starts the discussion, but also opens up new topics for discussion. And what I like about this is this person needs to get everyone involved. So if you've got someone in the group who doesn't say anything, they say, oh, we haven't yet, I think we haven't yet heard from Beth. What is your opinion on this? What do you think about that? So you've got the instigator, then the builder develops and runs with the idea, so builds upon what other people have said. I agree and would like to add. Building on that idea, I think. Linking to what I said, I think. And it's all about developing point. You've got the summarizer, which I think is quite a difficult one, and definitely higher up in school. It's just picking out those main ideas from the discussion and talking about what the main points are and what they focused on. And then you've also got the challenger, who gives reasons to disagree or presents an alternative argument. So what they would be in the center of the table, like I said. So say you've set your topic for discussion, and I'm going to show you how later on, after Beth talks about the mathematic ones of the talk cards that we've developed, how you can set the questions to discuss. And it's not just one question, you can do discussion points. And I think that's a really good way of developing the oracy and what's happening within that session, so they're not just stuck on one topic for the whole time. But these are really, really useful. They're laminated, they're in every classroom, and they're used then to structure again the talk. So it's not just go off and discuss this in a group and then they're just a free-for-all. This is more structured. So then these are the mathematical ones.
So what we felt then, that they didn't really work sort of in maths lessons if they were just, because it would take too much time and it takes the focus sometimes off what the concepts are we're trying to teach. So what I did is these are differentiated. So if we look at the next one actually, because there's a bit more on those. So what we felt was that we wanted something that was differentiated, that could work throughout the school. But they're quite simply, the first thing I did was then, I agree because I disagree. Next time, and then what I've done is I've used the symbols from the Voice 21 cards. And can you see where it says why, what, and also what those symbols are? Because these are all up in class with us as well, with the symbols. So they know that it's the same role, but it's just basically a simpler version. But these work well, don't they? Even if they weren't, like we said, those talk tasks, these would be used then alongside, because they're still enhancing their vocabulary, because we still want them to improve their language skills through the mathematics. Obviously, we've translated these now. These are in Welsh in school, and that is something that we're always working on, the language and developing the grammatical sentence structures and everything. So this is a simple way that we found that we can push that. And obviously these are for sort of year 6 really, isn't it? Why are your answers 5, 6? Why do you believe this? I agree. But they will have used these questions in their Voice 21 different tasks across, but they're still able to use them. But
it's just for reasoning,
it's good
as well,
for reasoning and sort of those problem solving problem solving times. And, you know, we do a lot of, you know, Voice 21-y kind of things, sort of concept cartoons, those still come in, the same things, and you're still justifying your answers, and you're talking. So these work really well like that. So we created last year, I think I created these. We've given it a big push now, the end of last year and into this year, we'll be really concentrating on working more with these.
Mm-hmm. So coming back to what I said with the cards, is using talking points. So instead of just one question and setting that one question for your group to discuss, you would set talking points. So you have a list of points that kind of link together, and they then discuss them using the discussion cards. But the rules of it is you don't have to start with the top one. You can start discussing any of the ones that you want. And also, you don't have to discuss all of them. So it's more free. So for example, say a group gets into a really interesting conversation about people like footballers, probably my class would be, people like footballers are paid too much. So maybe they've spent the whole time talking about that, that's fine. If they're engaged and they're still getting their points across. But sometimes, you know, they'll go through all of them or they'll go through half of them. And what it does is it ensures that the discussion doesn't dry up. It doesn't become stale and boring and they don't go around the same different point. What we found with our philosophy for children, you know, is they can go round and round in circles, children. They'll come back to the same point constantly. And I think it's good then in philosophy, like I would lead that discussion to or pick up on what another child has said, and then you lead it off in a different way. But the talk points have been really useful. So this would be if you're talking about money, and we
use this as part of our financial education.
Yeah, financial education.
When we do financial education and the different. So we would use it in groups really, and then we would differentiate. You know,
so you can look here. There's a Welsh one. The kids have just put their they've scribed here their kind of ideas around it, but they don't have to. It can be purely oracy, but sometimes it's quite nice to capture that oracy and to have some evidence of what you've done. And then you can do the same in science. Talking points, testing on animals is okay, whatever the reason. Testing cosmetics on animals is acceptable because beauty is more important than animal welfare. Nothing should be tested on animals. Animals don't have feelings, so testing on them is okay. People's lives are more important than animals' lives. So, you know, you can do them about anything. It works with any topic, and just that the questions are kind of linked, but it gives them a different thing that they're discussing. And you can do it. This is in Welsh, obviously something I've used with the children, but this is all to do with our effect on the environment and global warming. And I gave them to kind of enrich the lesson a little bit more. I gave them different facts. So there was facts about animals, facts about global warming, all kinds of facts that they could read through to begin with. So they were more informed when it came to their discussion. So it wasn't just what they thought they knew. It was using actual information and a good way to kind of, for them to collect information. And then they discussed, is it too late to save our world? Is there a point fighting for equality if we aren't fighting to save the planet? The biggest threat to Earth is thinking that someone else will save it. So these questions are obviously aimed at year 6 because it's a year 6 example, but you could simplify it completely for any year group and you'd give them less choice the lower down you go. So maybe, you know, it'd be only even 1 or 2 questions that they can discuss, but it's a good way of building interest in the discussion so that it flows more and it gives you a real meaty oracy session. So it's not just oracy and then we're going to go on to writing. Actually, oracy is the focus of that lesson.
So I don't know if many of you have been on sort of the Gareth Metcalfe training or senior IC reasoning I don't know, resources that are out there. Everyone laughs at me in this school because, you know, I love everything I see, maths, and we've been using them here for quite a while. And actually, this is brilliant for Voice 21 because the way they're constructed they are for talk, you know, correct or incorrect way. So you'd use those talk cards like we have, and they've got to discuss why they think is correct, why don't they think it's incorrect, and why. And can you just put in the chat, do you have any, you know, do you use IC? Because they are, and the reason we love them even more, because they've been translated into Welsh, so actually we can use them. But what we try and do here, we do a strategy of the month, and we use a different strategy. So I said, prove your answer. We do correct, incorrect. We do, what other ones do we have?
Too far, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so that's how we've sort of been pushing it last year and this year. There's a strategy every month.
Yeah.
So everyone then is using the same strategy every month, and I've taken a lot of them from the Gareth Metcalfe things, because they are, so every month then, say it's prove it, everyone in their maths, that's the one they concentrate, and they put into them their maths lessons then as well. So it's sometimes it's a talk task, sometimes it would be a task in the book. So they still have to prove it. So if there is still that reasoning and that talk happening. And we find this is becoming now, we are embedding this in, and it's becoming daily practice now within classes.
Everyone seems to be using
it.
Well,
great. It's brilliant. So this to me works, you know, coincides brilliant with Voice 21 in maths then, and with the talk cards and these, you're good to go basically.
Do you have any questions at this point?
Because we feel like we're
a lot. Expecting and maybe rushing through things. But has anyone got any questions, anything that you want to ask, or anything you're unsure of about what we've explained? Or is there any way you see, oh yeah, that would work with the topic I'm doing at the moment? Because, you know, what we wanted to try and do today is that give you ideas that you can just take back. You can have the PowerPoint, that's fine. Yeah, ideas you can take back, and then you can adapt to the different topics that you're doing. That's what I always feel like I like on a course, is actual coming there with, these are the things that I can go back and use, and I can think, right, I can see exactly where that will slot in.
Because it was interesting when we were preparing for it, we went sort of around the school, right, what is everyone doing, who's doing what and where, and actually we found there's quite a lot going on when we actually,
things we thought, actually we need to revisit this.
Yeah, so it's been great for us preparing for it, knowing where we want to move forward and improve as well, isn't it?
Definitely.
But yeah, you can have the PowerPoint, that's fine.
So talk detective, I'm not sure if you've seen this, and you can do them in different ways when the children are doing their discussion. So if they're doing their discussion points, they're having the chat. So obviously you're walking around, you're seeing what's going on, but sometimes it's nice to have a talk detective or two, and you can switch the roles during the session. So the talk detective's role is to go and listen to different groups talking. And then what they do is they can pick up things that they've noticed. So you could do it like this, where you actually, this is from Voice 21, where they actually named different people who did these types of things. But it all depends on your class. If you've got a class, I think, that might be upset if someone says, oh, you didn't pick me and you chose so-and-so, and I did something amazing. You can do it just simply. I've got like a tick list thing they do where they tick if they've heard these things, and then they will write little notes, and then they have a chance then to feed back to the class. So they'll go something like, and I always tell them, you know, if you're saying things that are constructive and want to improve, I don't want you to name names, because otherwise you're going to have someone saying, oh, Abigail didn't do this, or she was messing around and she wasn't listening. Where actually, it's good to say, in some groups, there were people who weren't listening and were messing around and not really contributing. So it's a good way, hearing from the children, that peer assessment of what's happening. And you wouldn't have the same person doing it for the whole session. You'd switch it around. So at different points then during the oracy session, you're going to stop and kind of, it's a good way of you assessing what's happening as well. But it's also those pit stops. So you're actually ensuring that they are focused. So we find that works really well as well.
And there's a lot of, it takes a long time to be able to do this as well, isn't it? To pick it up. in terms
the little
of
kids love it as well. You know,
yeah,
they can,
yeah.
you give them a hat or you give them a little magnifying glass and they're
But by
off
6,
doing
you
their
want, you
role.
want it more honed in, don't you? But it takes, you know, everyone's got to do a little bit before it's really develops, isn't it? Into something that's done well then, isn't it?
And it can be quite good to use someone who is a little bit quieter, but you know, that they've got things to say, but they don't always use their voice very well. Or the other way, someone who talks too much and is massively talkative and just needs to learn to listen to others. So I think that's really helpful. Right, so concept maps. This is one of the things
we love these.
That we love. And it just goes really closely with stuff like Pike Orbit. So if anything oracy you're doing, but the concept maps and using them cross-curricularly, especially in science and some in maths when it comes to that, the money.
Yeah.
What is that in English? I can't even think.
Financial education.
Financial education, that's what I'm thinking of. Welsh words are popping into my head today. So if you're like me and you love drawing, this is my thing. Love creating these concept maps. So you'd start off with you creating them, and then we've got to a point now where the children can create their own. But pollination, so in year 6 we learn about pollination. So at the beginning of the topic, instead of just giving them a PowerPoint of information about it and then they're telling us back or getting them to research into facts, you just give them this. So I'm going to give them the pollination concept map to begin with no information, and I ask them with their talk partner to discuss what they think is happening at each different point. And you're going to say, right, and then you come back and you ask anyone, can anyone tell me what they think is happening? You know, what's happening at each different point? Were there any bits you were a bit stuck on, you didn't really understand, you didn't know what was happening, you couldn't work it out? And then what I would do is, why is it? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
And then I'd give them the concept map to go back. And this time I want you to discuss it again, but I want you to use this key vocabulary. Can you use this vocabulary as you discuss? Does this help you understand any of the parts? So already you've got them engaged because you've got them looking at pictures, you've got them trying to work out what's happening, and then you can give them the information. You know, we always do drama with this. You've got the bees buzzing around, they're going to the different flowers, you've got your post-its as your pollen, and they're picking up the post-its as they're going around. So that's always kind of links nicely in with that. But what it really helps as well is those children in class who really struggle to explain concepts. And what I find is quite difficult, especially when you teach higher up, is the concepts that you're teaching are difficult, and differentiation, it doesn't always help to get that understanding from them of a difficult concept.
The concepts are so difficult
to
begin with.
Putting it visually is a massive help then to the children. So they then go off and then they explain pollination. So they would write an explanation for me. So they would change what they have done in these different points into their paragraphs. They do little pictures to go with it, but it's their paragraphs to explain what pollination is. We did the same with seed dispersal. So these are the different ways that seeds can be dispersed. Have a chat, have a think, what do you think's happening? Why do you think that? So it's a nice way to begin your topic. Year 5, we're actually going to be using this next week during inspection. They're looking at adaptation. So created a concept map. They're looking at the Galapagos Islands. So you've got the iguanas in the Galapagos Islands. The iguanas usually eat leaves. They live on trees. But when they went to the Galapagos Island, there weren't the leaves that they needed. There weren't enough. So they had to adapt, and they've adapted to be able to eat the seaweed and the algae that lives under the water. So then they had to adapt to be able to swim. They can dive. They can hold their breath for a certain amount of time. They actually expel salt through sneezing it out of their nostrils. So all these types of stuff.
Which is difficult concepts.
Which are difficult concepts, but having the pictures and trying to work out what's happening. And, you know, we have a year 5 group who are quite challenging in their behaviour, but also challenging in terms of they do struggle We've had, you know, they do need a lot of differentiation. So we found that pictures and making things visual is a really good way of getting them involved in that. Therefore, they then would discuss this, and then this is kind of like the basis to the lesson on the different things. And then what they're going to end up doing is they're going to choose their own animal, and then they have to adapt that animal to a different environment, thinking about what that animal needs to be able to survive in that environment. And it's something that they really enjoy doing. So the concept maps work really well. Like I said, financial education, our money week. So I created like a concept map. They had to work out what was happening and what they thought about it. And then they went on their actual task was to create their own about a money aspect. So,
and because it's, you know, for some it's drawing pictures, isn't it? But actually what they're getting out of it, and like we say, sort of when there's challenging behaviour or when there's these kind of activities seem to help the ones that do find things challenging. And obviously we wouldn't give everybody a lengthy, you know, there'd be a shorter version, or what we'd ask them to do would need to be as long, you know, as much information in them.
So for example, year 3 are learning about teeth. So they've been learning about how teeth develop, and then the different types of teeth. Well, if you're looking at your SEN children or your children who need more support, they might be just looking at how the teeth develop and not going as deep into
of the teeth,
the names of the teeth. But it's just a nice way into different concepts. And what you find is when it comes to writing, then there are less kind of questions of, oh, I don't know what's happening here, because they go, I'm just going to go and have a look at the map and just remind myself what is the next step. It's not them copying something down because you've not given them the information written already. It's them thinking, okay, can that kind of, you know, make me remember what happens at this point? For example, in the pollination, you know, they always get stuck on what happens when the seed and then part of it expands and that becomes the fruit. They're always a bit confused by that part. So it's a good way for them to just go back and have a look. And also that, you know, question of, have you used that key vocabulary? If you're looking at science, you want that vocabulary in their writing and anything that they're doing. So that works really well. So this would be, you could do it in any lesson. So this is an example. It's not from a STEM lesson or a maths lesson. It's from a literacy lesson. We've been learning about Malala Yousafzai, and I wanted a lesson all about gender equality. And I used this. It's not the best picture, but you've got things like, I asked them to pick out as many facts as they could from looking at this. So they had Post-its and they had to pick out any facts. So the world's most, God, it's not even big here for me. 65 million girls don't go to school is one of the first ones. Only 22% of women are in parliament. 33,000 15 to 18-year-olds get married every week. So they had to just pick out those number facts, and the facts that I wanted them to get. It just makes them work it out more instead of just go and research and find the information. It's just a different way of doing that. So that could be used in any session as well, you know, easily adapted. Flying best through all of this. So this is something that came from the Voice 21 training that I did, but they showed us how it would work in like a mini project within science. So they were looking at different cells.
It's quite this is a difficult process.
It's a little bit more secondary school, but it would work higher up in school, and it just shows how the concept would work. So you could use that then, you know, with any scientific concept really. So what is a cell? So they would do this grouping back to back. So one child would have an image and the other child would be giving them instructions of how to draw what the image is. So you wouldn't give them any information to begin with, no context for anything. They would be saying, firstly draw this, next do this. And then the other child has their sentence stems as well. If they're not sure, you know, can you explain again, how big, how small do I need to do this? what goes next to this. So the first child would have this image, and then the other child would be explaining to them how to draw it. And then at the end, they'd compare the images to see how similar they are. So they love stuff like this. And then they'd swap over and they do the same with the next image. So it's just a nice way. So this is completely drawing, but it's still got that structured talk. And I think that's
listening skills, isn't it?
Listening, structured talk, asking if they're unsure. You know, we're trying to work a lot at the moment in school on our children's independence. We find that they're very reliant at times on us. I don't know if you feel the same. And, you know, it's getting them to think, right, you know, what do I need to ask to solve this problem? What can I use in class that's going to help me? And I think getting them to ask these questions is a good way of doing that. So then they are given descriptions, and then they need to label the parts of the cell from the descriptions given. Therefore, they don't have any information still at this point. So the descriptions they would have come on the next on the next slide, and then they would basically, these would be cut out, and they basically have to match them to which cell it is that they think it is. So you do this before you know, before giving them the correct information. Then obviously you're going to go back, you're going to check up, does everyone agree? Have you put them in the same place? And it's just a nice way then of introducing things. So exactly the same with anything you're doing. You know, you could give them descriptions and things to label. Where do you think this would go? Why do you think, why have you put it there? Does every group agree? Do you disagree with that? Why? So it's just
like a longer drawn out version of the concept maps in a way, isn't it?
It is.
Sort of doing one of the stages of the concept map.
I just like the way they kind of cut it down. And then they had what is similar, what is different. It's these sentence stems that are super important. It's something that, you know, maybe you do that already and you were already doing it before the Voice 21, but I think we weren't as much. We were asking them questions and we weren't actually structuring it. And I think that's been one of the biggest changes for us across our oracy, is that giving them that structure is super important, because then you can get them to think about how then, you know, practicing through oracy is going to always improve their writing. You know, as literacy coordinator, I'm massively looking for that oracy as part of those lessons as well. And then a concept map then to end. So the same idea as what we've created with ours. How does infection occur? School 21 do have discussion guidelines. So they discuss like almost like a contract as a class. When we're discussing, these are the things that we need to remember. We show we are listening, we respect each other's ideas, we build upon challenge, summarize, clarify, and probe each other's ideas. We are prepared to change our mind. That can be difficult sometimes. Philosophy is something that's helped us with that. We invite others to the discussion, and we try to reach a shared agreement. So it's just reminding them of these rules that they need to use when they are doing oracy tasks. So then they would discuss this concept map and talk about what they think is happening. So how does an infection occur? What happens? Then the same thing, you would introduce vocabulary, get them to discuss it again with the vocabulary. So it's all just leading up to, and then they had the same thing with how do antibiotics work? So, you know, why is it important to finish off your antibiotics? What happens if you don't? And how is it useful? So basically, that's how it would kind of fit into a series of lessons that are incorporating Voice 21 strategies. That's what we've got to say. I know we're a bit quicker than an hour, but it's difficult to kind of gauge how long you're going to be. But we would like, you know, is there anything you want to ask now? Is the opportunity, anything you think, or do you use this, or how would you change this for something, you know, anything really, any, you don't have to write it in the chat. If you want to just speak, raise your hand.
I have stopped the recording.